What do you do when your faith system no longer fits? Because sometimes you outgrow it. Sometimes you graduate, you ascend. You leave the old, itchy, worn-out way and you begin to walk in the new. Sometimes you grow. Join the conversation with me, Tony Werfel, author, speaker, teaching pastor, as we help unwrap and rebuild a faith that no longer fits. We learn to walk into the new, messy journey called life. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Faith Undone, where we learn to deconstruct and reconstruct a faith, a way of viewing the world I would say, in a healthier way. So again, welcome to Faith Undone. So we are going to be moving through some really interesting ideas that I'm actually going to be working through with the community here, Ethos. And so I'm going to share with you some ideas and go a little bit heavier in some ways. And if any of this strikes a chord with you, if any of it lands well, or maybe it doesn't land well, please send me some messages and let's just keep the communication going. This is going to be a lot of fun. And by the way, any of you continuing to be a patron and sharing some of your resources so that we can continue this podcast, the book, all of that, thank you. And the next chapter is going to be right there in your email box in about a month. And so I've just enjoyed seeing all the comments from you, all the responses. Yeah, oh, what about this? Have you thought about considering this idea? Or maybe change this word? It's been awesome. Just the creative process of doing it in community. So much fun. So I want to start this series framing the divine, understanding the mystery, because the idea here behind this whole series I want to do with you is that how we view God, our theology, actually has more to say about us often than it does about God. And so I would even say that the ideas we have about God have evolved. There's a reason why today, when you say the word God, many people will immediately have this picture of a middle-aged white man on clouds. There's a reason you have that picture. That picture came from somewhere. There's a reason why many of us, when we talk about God, God actually has the same values, the same core beliefs, the same ideas, actually looks more like you than that picture did a long time ago. The picture has evolved. It's grown with you and with the history and the place and the time and space you're in. And so here's how I kind of want to start the conversation. For me, I don't know about you, have you ever been to a place where you go to this beautiful scenery, like you go to the Grand Canyon, or you see something really powerful? I know when we were in Colorado, there were these awesome moments where you would climb up this mountain and you would just be exhausted. And as you got to the top, all of a sudden the view was worth it. And you see that beautiful panoramic view of the entire city. When we were there in Colorado, Boulder, we'd look out and just see it all. And I remember it being so beautiful. And then we would pull out our phones. And most of you know where I'm going with this. You would take your phone out and you would try to take a picture, right, of what you're seeing. And you'd get home later that day and you might even share it with people. But when you looked at the picture, it didn't really say the feelings. It didn't portray the awe that you were feeling at that moment, because the picture was pretty small. Like the picture didn't capture the essence, the beauty of the entirety of the thing. You only framed like a very small bit of the larger picture. Even with the panoramic stuff, it doesn't capture the beauty, the depth, the space of that thing, of that moment, of that landscape. And I would say we're not even talking about the picture anymore. We're not talking about landscapes. We're actually talking about the divine. And I would say that all throughout history, we have these moments in time where we have kind of a glimpse of something, and we've tried to frame it, and we've tried to use our language. And if we're going to be honest, the language to describe the mystery, the moment of awareness, whatever you want to call God, right? The force, the energy, the being up there, however you want to describe it, those pictures, they came from someone essentially trying to frame a moment of awe. And that's where I want to start with this thing. I grew up believing that the divine was this white guy with flowing beard and long flowing white hair, and he was sitting up there somewhere. and this literal being with hands and feet that looked very similar to me, kind of grandfatherly. I had this picture of this guy that he was kind of angry, and rightfully so, because me and the rest of the world, we didn't measure up, and he was a little bit pissed at us, and so he wanted to love us, but we had to start doing the right thing, and if we didn't start doing the right thing, then there were going to be punishments. And probably along with those punishments, he might even begin to remove himself from our presence, and we might begin to feel a bit sad or removed from this God. But as I begin to understand where that picture came from, the reality is that picture of God came from the tribe I was in, but also the familial structure I was in, my family. How we interacted with one another also played a part in how I viewed God, this picture of God, this idea of God that had been framed. And I wonder for you who are listening or watching right now, think about that for just a minute. How has the divine been framed for you? Because the ideas you have often come from various interpretations or familial circles or experiences you've had. How have you arrived with this picture? And many of us have had pretty unhealthy pictures. But I think if we get down to the truth and the matter of the fact is that this picture actually says more about our understanding of the world than it does about the actual mystery of this force, this energy, this God. It says more about us than it does about this God. And so I've been doing a lot of studying about early man and just the evolution of man. Because if we're going to be honest, when we look at history, the Israelites are not the first people. I'm sorry, that's just not correct. Israel is actually a pretty young nation. So when you begin looking back archaeologically, you begin to find these people called, we call them cave people, right? These are cave people. And these people, when you look back at the archaeology of it, and you begin to understand these people, you'll see they are hunter-gatherers. They were the first people to establish the paleo diet, right? These are those people. And these people, they basically were very nomadic. They kind of traveled all over. And oftentimes what you would find with these people is, yes, they had their spears. They found different ways of catching prey, that kind of thing. They would eat until they were full, and then they may not eat for days. These were very tribal, very archaic kind of people. Yet again, they had some self-awareness. Again, we have all these weird pictures of what these cavemen looked like whoa, whoa, and they're barely talking, but we know they were communicating. We know they were fairly advanced, and we even know they had some self-awareness. And here's what I mean by that. We get this idea they were cave people, right? That they lived in caves. But what we're finding historically from all this archaeology that's been done is that they didn't actually live in caves. They didn't. What we found here is really fascinating. They didn't live in caves. They had this idea that in the caves was a mystery. There was something divine in the cave. And so when you would go through these caves and you begin finding more and more of these drawings on the caves, what you'll find is when you go deep enough, there's really interesting things written on the caves. And I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, but I'm saying this to say there is some interesting self-awareness going on. They were actually doing forms of worship because they had no idea what is inside of these caves. And there was even this idea that if you go further enough into the cave, you would find the essence of life. You would find the thing that keeps everything together. You would find the mystery, the awe. That's what they believed, which means they had to have had some kind of awareness that they were a self. Yeah, follow me here. Here's something interesting about what they would do with their dead. So if they were truly cave people and they were just brutal barbarians and this and that, had no real brain cells, that's how we would look at them, then they would just leave their dead just lying there. They wouldn't even think twice. It's what the animal kingdom does most of the time. They would just leave them there to be eaten by other predators that might even eat them themselves. But that's not actually what these early people did. What these early people did is they showed that they actually have an awareness of self and even something beyond that. Because here's what they did with the dead. They actually bury the dead. Yeah, they would bury their dead. They had this idea that there was something really sacred that would happen when someone died. They wanted to bless the person even after the person's no longer breathing. And you would even see that they would actually have like shell necklaces or bone necklaces or different things that would have been very important to them at that time. They would bury those things with the person. Yeah, because for them, they understood this interesting idea that there is more to the person than just simply a body. The idea was a spirit. And we see this all throughout their cave drawings. There's something that comes out of people that's like this essence of life. And so what you get when you begin looking at these early tribal people is that they actually believed, even back then in this evolutionary process, that there was something bigger, something divine, something mysterious happening, and it was engaging with them all the time. They were actually a part of it. And so when you begin to move into like the Mesopotamia civilization, which is the earliest civilization, it's when they actually began to become more tribal. They actually began to come together in groups. So they moved from this just nomadic one family or so into communities. You have Mesopotamia. And so with Mesopotamia, again, they would go to the mouth of these caves, and they would begin these worship practices. And when you begin to understand what's going on with Mesopotamia and the archaeology of that time, you begin to see that they're going deeper and deeper into the caves. And every drawing that you see is not actually a drawing of like history. We had this idea, yeah, they're drawing pictures of themselves killing animals and this and that. That's not actually what these were. What they've understood now is these pictures were actually like they would put a picture of a bison up, and there would be this arrow going through it, but on the other side of it there was this spirit thing, this shadowy thing that would come out of it. And again, for them it was sacrificial offerings to something greater. Do you see how they've evolved? They've moved, because first it started with awareness that they are something more than just a body. There's something inside that is holy and sacred. They understood that even in the beginning of this evolutionary process. They understood that. And so that's how they began to frame the idea of the divine, the mystery. Now, please understand, this mystery, it doesn't start with a body. It doesn't start with someone that looks and acts like us. That's later on. Even in a Mesopotamian culture, you see a shift. It starts with the idea that inside all of us is this breath, this spirit, this divine soul thing. And once you die, they said, we don't know where it goes, but it has to go somewhere because it's intricately involved in everything we do. That is really powerful to me when I consider these early people and just the idea of their self-awareness. Now, when you go and you look at how Israel and these Jewish people viewed it, it's really fascinating because, again, we know Genesis is written in the Babylonian exile around 587 BC, but they're looking back and they're compiling all of these stories. And so please understand, again, Genesis is really the story of Israel, just like every single one of the stories in Torah. They're all a story of Israel miniaturized in a character. Abraham, Moses, Joshua, they're all Israel miniaturized. But when you look at the story of Genesis through this lens of spirit, the whole thing actually starts to pop. And so let me share with you what I mean by that. When you look at Genesis 1:26, it says, "Let us make man in our image." And now, over and over and over again, in my life, I heard many people say, see, that means God actually looks like us. He's got hands and feet and toes, and so God made himself in our image, right? Which is kind of weird when you begin thinking about that. It actually begins to kind of break apart when you begin to look physiologically, and you begin to look at so many different elements of it. God looks like us. It's a human form. Well, then how does God interact with us? All those questions begin to come into play when you view it in this literal way. But let me give you a little shift to kind of chew on for the rest of the week. Because here's the shift. The word us in the Hebrew, it actually means like the space, the universe around us. It's a very breathy kind of thing. Yeah? So that idea of us is a spirit kind of thing. And the word image, it actually means like the mold, the thing that encases it all. So you take all that air and you just kind of put something around it and you hold it in and you got this balloon, right? That's kind of the idea that the Hebrew gives us. And so a better way of understanding this would be something like this. Again, us, the mystery all around us that can't be explained. So again, remember us that way, the mold, the way that we put everything together. So a better interpretation of this, it might look like this for the Hebrews. It might look like, let the mystery behind all creation mold dirt into spirit. Think about that now. It pops. Let me say it one more time. A better interpretation of this would be this. Again, fitting more with the Hebrew. It would be, let the mystery behind all creation mold dirt into spirit. Come on. Does that make sense? Ever have a moment where your dirt shows? Ever have this moment where you're just so angry about something, and out of you just comes like this dirt, gross anger, and you just kind of come undone. I've had these over and over and over again. And I remember just the other day, we were told, look, you got to get rid of your trampoline. And I remember feeling really frustrated about this because my kids play on this trampoline every single day. And this poor property manager, she came here and she had this paper. And again, I didn't totally agree with what was written on the paper and all this. But I remember later, I just came undone on her and other people. Just, how dare you say this? I wasn't in violation. I was ready to fight. And I just found myself feeling kind of like an ass because I kind of came undone on her. It's not my house. I'm renting the house. I should do what the landlord says. But no, I had to make this big thing all about me, and I got angry and frustrated, and I just kind of came undone. There have been other moments where I'm driving on the freeway and I'm talking on the phone, and all of a sudden I lose a signal, and I'll think like, I'm gonna throw this thing out of the car. I'm so mad, or whatever. You just lose it. You lose it, and you come undone, and you reconnect not with spirit, but with dirt. Yeah, because that's what's happening when we come undone. We're disconnecting from spirit, and we're just wallowing in dirt. And that's why people will oftentimes tell you, just stop and breathe, right? Many of you have had that happen. Tony, just stop and breathe. But here's the beauty of stopping and breathing. It's actually really ancient. The idea here is when you stop, you actually become aware again of what's important. You actually stop and you look around at your surroundings. Because ancient caveman, Mesopotamian people, they were aware of their surroundings. They had to be, or you'd be eaten by a tiger, right? You had to be aware of your surroundings. Today, we are so distracted. We're hypersensitive to so many things that I would argue we actually have lost the ability to actually see our surroundings. We become so desensitized because there's so much stuff all around us. Whereas caveman, the ancients, there's only so many things. And the point was like, stay alive, get to your next meal, right? You became aware of what was important to you. And so stop. Take a moment when you have that dirt clod experience, or before you do, and just stop and say, what's important to me? What's important to me? What's valuable to me right now? Is the relationship I'm about to break because I'm about to just lose it on this person? Is it worth it to do that? Or is the relationship more important? And then the idea of breathing, right? Stop and then breathe. So again, the idea of breath gets you back in touch with spirit, the divine, the power that basically gives us life. And so breath, when you get this, when you stop and you breathe, everything around you becomes sacred. Everything around you becomes sacred when you learn to just stop and breathe. And here's why I think that's beautiful. Because we are in a culture, especially Christian cultures, we like to label things sacred and secular. But for these ancient people, life was sacred. The animal that you killed that gave you food that day was sacred. The ability to communicate was sacred. Everything was holy. Everything was sacred. Because it's only sacred when you stop and you participate and breathe with it. To us, we have secular today because we stopped breathing. If we were to stop and realize that even Eminem's Recovery album is a holy, sacred thing, it's a lament, everything begins to pop and just be filled with energy. And that's why when you stop and you breathe, your neighbor becomes sacred. Your neighbor becomes holy. When you stop and you breathe, your environment becomes holy. It's not just something that we use to power our cars and to do all of our technology and sustain us. It's actually something that we interact with. It's something we want to keep rather than just consume. It's holy. It's sacred. And even like the stuff we do with our hands, the work, the things we do with our own creativity, the art that we create, all of that, that's not just a job. It's something sacred and holy, right? Yeah, if you considered your job sacred and holy, you might have a different perspective and a different response to how you interact with it every day. And so I met a new friend this week, and she's a midwife. And basically, she helps people. It was so interesting to talk to her, but she helps people move through the process in like a holistic way. And you basically, she'll go to the house and she'll help people do these water births. And it's beautiful to hear her talk about it. And so she was telling me that she had this amazing moment of awareness because there in the tub, the woman gives birth. And this woman gave birth and she pulls baby out real slowly. And she brings the baby in and holds it. This baby that she'd been carrying around all these months. And she brings the baby in. And the baby begins to rock and barely crying, just kind of rocking with mom. And my friend said she walked over and she did what most people, doctors will do. She went and she cut the umbilical cord. And when this mom saw this, it was almost like she felt it because what happened is when the cord was cut, the mom's eyes got wide and she just started weeping, just crying. And my friend, the midwife, she said, what's going on? Why are you crying? What happened? Are you hurt? What's going on? And the woman just said, I've held this baby inside of me for all these months. And we have had this connection. I've felt baby move and change and shake and kick me. And we've been connected. We've had this connection. And now the connection has been severed. And it was so interesting, beautiful, tragic. It was all those things. The mom was so interconnected with baby. And when that connection was broken, she could feel it. And I think this beginning of understanding that first archaic people, right? These cavemen, they had that interesting, beautiful understanding of the divine mystery all around us. And they understood they were connected to it like a mother to her child through this umbilical cord. They are connected intimately with the divine. They can't go anywhere. This is why the authors of the Old Testament will say, I can go nowhere where you are not there. That's the idea. That's how these people first framed the divine, was that the divine was everywhere, even among us, outside of us, inside of us. It was so interconnected that it was like a mother to a child. Spirit, breath, so beautiful. And so this is just one of the ways that I want to share with you where how the divine, the mystery has been framed through the years. Anyways, I hope that this week You will have these moments of divine awareness, these moments where you stop, you renegotiate what's important. You have these moments where you breathe again and you feel connected once again to that beauty, that life, that love that's all around us. Call that God, call it the force, call that whatever you will. But I hope you will take time to reconnect again. Blessings, everyone. And as always, please visit my Patreon page, www.patreon.com/TonyWerfel, and donate there. Help us keep this thing going, and I will see you next week. Blessings. Talk to you later.